October 4th, 1944, near Lucca, Italy. The Apennine Mountains were cloaked in mist, their jagged silhouettes barely visible under a bruised autumn sky. Rain mixed with gunpowder in the air, and the sound of boots sank into mud thick as glue. To the north, the Gothic Line, Hitler's last defensive wall in Italy, waited like a jagged scar of steel and stone. Private First Class William "Red" Jones gripped his M1 rifle tighter, his hands raw beneath the damp leather gloves. His breath rose in clouds as he crouched behind a pile of broken masonry, once part of a Tuscan farmhouse, now a shield against the unseen. Around him, the men of the 92nd Infantry Division, the Buffalo Soldiers, prepared to advance. If stories like this move you, make sure you're subscribed, because history remembers those who refused to be forgotten. A German loudspeaker crackled from across the valley. A voice spoke in broken English, mocking, taunting. "Go home, black boys. You don't belong here. Americans send you to die." The words rolled through the fog like poison. Some men laughed it off, others tightened their jaws. Lieutenant John Fox, a quiet Ohio-born forward observer, simply checked his watch. "Let them talk," he said softly. "We'll answer with fire." The 92nd had waited years for this moment, to prove themselves, to prove wrong every newspaper, every general who said they weren't fit for combat. They had trained under white officers who doubted them, been relegated to menial work, and marched miles behind front lines built by prejudice. But tonight, in the rain and smoke, the line between mockery and vengeance blurred. "Red," Sergeant Lewis called. "Flank left, we move at my signal." Red nodded. The air smelled of wet earth and cordite. Somewhere ahead, a German MG-42 opened up, its chatter splitting the night like tearing cloth. Bullets hissed past. Red hit the ground hard, cheek pressed into mud, feeling it cold against his skin. Imagine standing there, your heart pounding loud enough to drown the world, knowing every step forward defies not just the enemy ahead, but the history behind you. The Buffalo Soldiers surged up the hill. Their rifles spat flame. Mortars howled overhead, bursting against the ridgeline. The fog glowed orange as tracer rounds zipped through it. Men shouted commands drowned by thunder and machine gun fire. "Push forward," Lieutenant Fox yelled into the radio. "Mark the ridge. We've got them pinned." For hours they fought uphill through olive groves and shattered terraces. The Germans, veterans of the Wehrmacht's elite 16th Panzer Division, expected an easy fight. Instead, they met precision, discipline, and fury. When dawn broke, the rain had stopped. Smoke hung low across the valley. The 92nd stood atop the ridge they weren't supposed to take. Nazi banners smoldered among blackened stones, and on that cold Tuscan morning, one German prisoner muttered to another, in disbelief in his voice, "Die Schwarzen, they fought like devils." Below, the men of the 92nd gathered around their wounded. Red Jones knelt beside a comrade, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "We made it," he whispered. "We showed him." But the war was far from over. This was only the beginning, a climb not just through mountains, but through centuries of chains and silence. October 26th, 1944, north of Massa, Italy. The valley lay quiet now, the calm that always followed slaughter. Burned-out trucks rusted beside the road, their metal frames still warm from fire. Crows circled low. The Gothic Line stretched ahead, trenches, pillboxes, barbed wire coiled like veins of iron across the hills. Captain Edward Drayton stood with binoculars raised, scanning the ridgeline. His dark face was streaked with grime, his uniform soaked from the previous night's rain. "He said we wouldn't make it this far," he muttered. "Guess they forgot who built these damn roads." He wasn't wrong. The 92nd had done more than fight. They had carried ammunition up cliffs where jeeps couldn't go, laid cable through shell fire, and hauled artillery by hand. Every step north was written in blisters and blood. Yet even as they advanced, whispers spread through Allied command, reports questioning their discipline, their aggressiveness, their fitness for combat. The men heard it all, and they kept climbing. The hills of northern Italy were cruel, steep, cold, and crawling with mines. The Germans had spent months fortifying them, turning every farmhouse into a bunker. The Buffalo Soldiers were ordered to probe these defenses, to test them. It was a mission that meant casualties. Testing, Red Jones thought bitterly, as he and his squad crawled through the underbrush. Machine gun bursts erupted from the ridge above. The earth spat back dust and stone. Red ducked behind a boulder, heart hammering. "Keep moving," Sergeant Lewis shouted. "But sir, they've got that MG nest covered." "Then flank right. Do it fast." They moved like shadows, hugging the terrain. The sound of gunfire blended with the whine of ricochets. When they reached the base of the ridge, Lewis tossed a grenade over the crest. The explosion rolled like thunder, followed by a scream. Moments later, silence. Red climbed the slope, boots slipping on loose shale. He reached the top and froze. Before him lay a German bunker, its entrance blown open. Inside, 2 dead soldiers. On the wall, a crude caricature sketched in charcoal. Black soldiers drawn as animals, with a caption in jagged letters, Untermenschen, subhumans. He stared at it for a long time. Rain began to fall again, washing the drawing into streaks. Lewis came up behind him. "Don't waste a thought on it," he said. "I'm not," Red replied quietly. "I'm remembering it." That night, around the campfire, the men spoke little. Some stared into the flames, others cleaned rifles in silence. Lieutenant Fox scribbled notes by lamplight, coordinates, weather, supply counts, his handwriting calm, precise, as if the world outside wasn't tearing itself apart.
"Think anyone back home knows what we're doing here?" Red asked finally. Fox looked up. "Not yet," he said, "but they will." Beyond the firelight, the wind howled through the mountains like an echo of centuries. Every man there knew this fight was bigger than the hills of Italy. It was about dignity, about proving that courage had no color. Days later, orders came. The 92nd would push into the Serchio Valley. The terrain was unforgiving, the enemy entrenched. Allied command wanted a diversion, something to draw German attention away from the main offensive. A suicide mission, some whispered. The Buffalo Soldiers didn't flinch. They had been doubted since the day they put on the uniform. But in the valleys of Italy, under a sky heavy with war, they were about to show the world once again that respect wasn't given, it was earned, inch by inch, in the mud. December 26, 1944. Somocolonia, Italy. Snow blanketed the rooftops like silence itself. The tiny mountain village looked almost peaceful, its stone houses glowing faintly in the pale winter light. But beneath the calm, tension coiled like wire. Lieutenant John R. Fox stood in a cramped attic, his field glasses pressed to the window slit. Below him, his men of the 366th Infantry, part of the 92nd Division, moved through narrow streets, laying mines, checking ammunition. He could smell pine smoke from the chimneys mixing with the metallic bite of cold steel. Through the scope he saw movement, dark figures slipping between trees along the hillside. Germans, dozens, maybe hundreds. The 16th Panzer Grenadiers were advancing again. Fox clicked his radio. "Command, this is Observer Fox. Enemy movement sighted east of town. Estimate a full company." "Copy that," the voice crackled back. "Hold your position. Reinforcements on the way." But he knew they weren't coming fast enough. The Buffalo Soldiers were alone on that mountain. The first mortar landed minutes later. The explosion shattered the quiet, sending tiles raining from rooftops.
The Germans opened up with machine guns, and the air filled with the ripping roar of the MG-42. Soldiers scrambled for cover as bullets shredded wooden doors and ricocheted off stone. Fox adjusted his field phone, calling in artillery coordinates. Target grid 305 Baker, fire for effect. Seconds later, shells whistled overhead, exploding along the tree line. The blasts echoed through the valley like thunderclaps. "Good hit," someone shouted below. But the Germans kept coming. Dozens turned to scores. They poured into the town like a dark tide. Fox watched them swarm the streets below. He could see his own men falling back, firing from windows, from doorways. Smoke and snow mingled until the world turned gray. He spoke into the radio again, voice steady despite the chaos. "Adjust fire. Closer. 100 yards. Lieutenant, you're in that range." "I said closer." Minutes passed. The artillery screamed again, shells crashing against the edge of the town. Fox could feel the shockwaves shake the floorboards. Still the enemy advanced. A sergeant burst into the attic. "Sir, we have to pull back." Fox didn't turn from the window. "No, if they break through here, they'll roll right into the valley. We hold." The sergeant hesitated. "With all due respect, sir, that's an order." He looked once more through his binoculars. German helmets glinted in the snow. They were nearly below his position now. Fox's voice came calm, almost detached, as he lifted the handset one last time. "Fire it here." The radio went silent. "Repeat, Lieutenant." Fox's hand trembled only slightly. "Fire it here. On my position." The line went dead. Moments later, the mountain shook. A storm of steel rained down on Somokolonia. Windows shattered, roofs collapsed. The blast consumed the attic in a wave of light and thunder. When the smoke cleared hours later, the Germans were gone, scattered, broken. They had taken the village for a moment and lost it forever. Days later, when Allied forces returned, they found Fox's body among the ruins. His radio was still in his hand. Around him lay the remains of dozens of enemy soldiers. For his actions, Lieutenant John R. Fox was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, later upgraded to the Medal of Honor. But in that frozen Italian village, long before medals or recognition, his men already knew the truth. He had given everything so they could live. Private Red Jones, who survived the fight, wrote in his journal that night, "Some said we couldn't lead, that we couldn't fight. Fox showed them what courage looks like when no one's watching." And across the lines, in their bunkers and barracks, Nazi officers who once mocked the colored troops now whispered a different word for them: Teufelssoldaten, devil soldiers. No longer talked about home or the color of their skin. They talked about survival, about brothers who didn't come back, about Lieutenant Fox, whose name carried like a prayer through the ranks. "Fox bought us another day," Sergeant Lewis said quietly one evening. "Another chance to finish this right." By spring, that chance came. The Buffalo soldiers were ordered to breach the German defenses near the Ligurian coast, an operation many said couldn't be done. The terrain was too rough, the defenses too strong. But the 92nd moved anyway. They marched through shattered villages where church bells hung silent and olive trees grew from rubble. Every step forward meant crawling under fire, crossing rivers under the hiss of bullets, and watching friends fall beside them. Yet they never stopped. On April 5, 1945, near the town of Massa, they struck hard. Artillery roared, machine guns spat flame. The Germans tried to hold, but their lines buckled under the assault. Red Jones led his squad up a hillside that had cost them lives for weeks. He could barely hear over the noise, but he felt it, the shift, the impossible turning. "Keep pushing," he shouted, voice hoarse. Behind him, the banner of the 92nd fluttered in the smoke. By dusk, the Buffalo Soldiers had broken through. The Gothic Line, once thought impenetrable, was breached by the very men the Nazis said couldn't fight. When the shooting finally stopped, Red stood on the ridge and looked down at the valley below. The air smelled of cordite and rain. The same hills that had mocked them now echoed with silence. He thought of Fox, of all the men who would never see home again. He picked up a handful of Italian soil and closed his fist around it. "We did it," he whispered. "They'll remember us." Weeks later, Germany surrendered. The guns went quiet. But when the men of the 92nd returned home, they found no parades waiting, no medals inned before crowds. The world moved on, forgetting their names even as it celebrated victory. Still, in the mountains of Italy, the people remembered. In towns like Somocolonia and Lucca, the villagers told stories of the dark-skinned soldiers who stood their ground, who fought with courage that defied hate. They rebuilt around the craters where the Buffalo Soldiers had fallen, and every spring wildflowers bloomed there, red and gold, where blood once stained the snow. Years later, historians would write of them and monuments would rise. But for those who were there, it was never about statues or headlines. It was about brothers, about proving that valor knows no color. Imagine standing there now, on that same ridge, the wind in your ears, the valleys quiet again. You can almost hear them still, the distant echo of boots in the mud, the voice of a lieutenant calling fire from the sky, the laughter of men who refused to be erased. In those hills, courage didn't ask for permission. It spoke in thunder. It answered with fire, and it won.